Hello and welcome again. This is the Spike2 Analysis 1 session. And just as a reminder, I'm using Spike2 version 10.09 here. Let's close that. Right. Analysis, or some features of the analysis menu anyway. And what we're going to look at today are the memory buffer functions, the virtual channels, and we're going to combine those with cursors, active cursors in this case, both horizontal and vertical. If we have time, we'll touch on the digital filters, and we'll certainly do a little on the marker filter. Some of the other functions, such as the new result views, power spectra, averages, etc., will be covered next week. Although, if any questions crop up that require them, at least I can show you how they operate. Okay, so analysis. Well, for some people, analysis is really just a matter of obtaining a value, perhaps from two cursors here. This is to reinforce what we've talked about before, an information window set up to show the difference between cursor 1 and cursor 2 here, and in this case, the mean level between those two cursors as well. So you'll see those values updating as I move the cursors. Now, if this were an XY view, then the info window would also hold information about the most recent data point on a measured channel, both in the X and Y, and we can make comparison to another data point in the same channel trace if we want to. Okay, so that's a reminder of what we can do with the info channels, info windows, sorry. Right, so memory buffers. Analysis, memory buffer, create new. Now, we did look a little in the sampling session at the different channel types. For example, waveforms, continuously changing waveform data digitized. We looked at the spike waveforms, which are wave mark type. And we touched on the events, event plus, minus, and level channels. Now remember, the event type channels are a digital pulse, that is from 0 to 5 volt, and event plus would indicate that we're recording the positive going edge, so the rise from 0 to 5 volts. Event minus, obviously the opposite of that, from 5 to 0, and the level channel would be where we're recording both, and therefore we get a duration. But there are other types of channels too. So the marker channel, which we can see at the top of the screen here. Text marks, which we can see as these colored, there is post-it notes on the data file. Real wave, real mark as well. And we'll go into a little more detail on these in just a second. But one example of use of a memory buffer. Let's choose a text mark type to create. I can then give some parameter to this new text mark channel, which might be the number of characters per post-it note I wish to apply. And then if I import the existing channel 30 and apply, I now have a copy of the disk-based channel shown here. Now, often the question is, okay, I've added these post-it notes, these text marks, as I've captured the data. There was an error. I want to, I want to delete, or I want to add or move a text mark. So we might take a cursor like so, and right-click on the memory channel, channel M1, add item. At which point we can say at the time, which could be typed in, or in this case using the position of the cursor, give it a code, give it something a little different there, and just put in test and add. And you can see that a new text mark has appeared here. Remember, we can change the channel draw mode from dots to state to duration. Draw. Now we can see the message during that period of time. Okay, so memory buffer. In this simple case, we're using it as a form of clipboard. It's very fast to access compared to something that's stored on disk. If we had to access data on disk, modify it, replace, change the data, we would constantly be rewriting the data, and that takes time. So using memory alone makes this very, very quick. The downside of that, although you will be warned, is that when we close the data file, if we haven't saved the memory channel back to a disk-based channel, we would lose all that information. Okay, so in later versions, you are warned, like so, if you close a data file without saving memory channels. I'll cancel out of that. Okay, so what else could a memory channel be used for? Well, we could use a level channel. A memory channel is a level channel. Let's do that. Create new buffer. It's a level channel. It shouldn't need very much other information apart from what state are we starting in. So we're sitting low just as we are in this channel 8 here. So sitting low and then we go high. I'm just going to say OK, and that's an empty memory channel. Put that here. I'll optimize this and just hide these away a little more. OK. What I'm now going to do is run a simple command. So I'm going to evaluate this command here, which is going to be channel 2002, memory channel, grabbing its data from channel 9 and then processing from 0 to max time. Okay, the way I can find out the channel number is by passing over the channel label here. So there it is, 2002 memory level. That's the channel I'm going to populate with burst data. That is, I'm asking this command to look at channel 9, these events, spikes, if you like, and draw the duration of bursts based on a minimum interval between spikes. Evaluate, and there we go. So we now have open-close states like this, showing us when we have a burst of spikes firing. And as you can see, there are spikes outside of this as well. Now, another burst command could give us statistics based on this new channel and the original event data. Okay, so another use of a memory channel. Now, we did this just the other day, where we might also want to take out a section of data. If we just zoom in here, I'll put a cursor somewhere at the end of this section and somewhere at the end here. And I want to combine this data with this, taking out the gap. So analysis, memory buffer, and create new. This time, I could choose to produce a real wave. Now, a real wave doesn't have the limitation of a waveform channel. A waveform channel exists in the 16-bit range of data on the screen. Real wave could effectively have infinite values, and we use it in one case to record data from third-party devices, because we don't necessarily know what range they would go to. I'll choose waveform mode to match the channel that I want to process, and I'm going to copy the settings, channel 4, channel 3 here. Okay, so import channel 3 from 0 to cursor 1. Okay, now if I, sorry, they should have been around the other way. That should have been cursor 2, of course. So what I'm going to do is delete items. So I'm going to empty the buffer now and start over. So channel 3, start time, end time is cursor 2, apply. So we've got a nice clean break there. Now, if I take the time measurement between cursor 1 and cursor 2, copied that, and now I do a channel process on channel 3, so time shift, add negative, add the time in, I've now shifted the data to the left, which now allows me to right-click on the memory channel once more, import channel, M3, importing channel 3, and that's going to be from cursor 2 to the end of the file. So max time, and apply. So now you see a nice clean join there through the baseline. Okay, so again, memory channels, a buffer, a clipboard, very fast to access, allowing us to manipulate data by adding, removing, moving data around, either manually or through the use of a script. So if I refer to a script now, we might take data like our demo file, which you should all have. So let's go up to Documents and to Slide 10, Data, and you will have inside this folder the demo.snr file. Okay, let's take this channel and we might run a script. So let's minimize that. There we have the script now running. Our original channel 1 shown here and our channel M1 created by the script, a memory channel with a duplicate of our original. Now you'll notice that the number 1 here for the sine wave is in red. That means that there is a channel process or some other function applied to this data, so it's not original. We'll check on that in a moment. Anyway, a script to show how quickly some of these functions can operate. So the idea here was to illustrate some artifact removal. So we might zero data in a range. We might go to fit a line between those 2 points. No, we'll do a straight line. We could replace one section of data with another. So where I'm moving the cursors on the left, that section is replacing the data between cursors 1 and 2. Okay, so let's say cancel to that. And then finally mouse. Now I did this some time ago where we might want to draw our data, but I just found a better way of doing that, and that is to use a function that allows me to read the mouse position. So another copy here. If I now hold down Shift and draw, you can see I can draw my waveform here. Now that would be virtually impossible with our speed-wise if we had to rewrite these blocks of data very, very often to a disk-based channel. So these volatile memory-based channels must be written to disk at the end of the session if you wish to keep them. Okay, so other functions using memory channels. We could go to waveform output. So I'm using a script just for speed here. But this little script has created a number of waveforms. You can see here M1, M2, and M3. The script has calculated the position, the values to represent sine and cosine with a changing frequency. I've then asked it to produce random numbers in the range -1 to +1 for the length of this section here. And then I've actually used virtual cursor channels at the top here to combine those memory channels for output. So in this case, we're going to use these for sound, added to play wave, loaded into the 1401 memory and played out during a recording. Okay, so Nice and easy to manipulate data in these memory channels. The virtual channels really add to the whole process. And if we look at the channel expressions here, there we go. We're setting a sample interval for the new output channel, and then we provide an expression to describe the shape that we wish to play out. And I've added +1 there. Take that out. We've got a nice ramp followed by a changing sinusoid. Okay, so now we're getting on to virtual channels. So let's close this data and just tidy up with the log view there. File, get back to the demo for a second. Okay, and in fact, I think I might go to channels first. Right, so let's say we have two channels here, channel 1, channel 2, and we'll look at producing an expression, subtract or adding one channel to the other in a second. It's not very meaningful for this data, but it just shows you a very simple output. So if we get to the virtual channels, create new. Okay. Right, a virtual channel is a calculated channel. It doesn't live in memory as such. It is simply recalculated as the source data changes. So if I were to type in here, match channel 1, and I type in channel 1, there, I have a duplicate. Sample rate is the same, the data is the same. If I channel process the original, perhaps by, yes, let's rectify, add, you'll see that the virtual channel is updated. If I smooth, you can see that the virtual channel is following suit. Okay, so the virtual channel, again, calculated, changing, recalculating as the source data changes. They can be used online. For example, if we take something like the DSI telemetry data in, we would have a blood pressure, and we might also be recording what they call an APR, so ambient pressure at the same time. Recorded as two channels, you then want to subtract that ambient pressure from the blood pressure to get a corrected reading out of it. Now, the virtual channel information, that is the expression, sample rate, etc., that goes to produce this, is held within the resource file next to the data file. Now, remember, the resource file is there to redraw, redisplay the data as you last left it. So whenever you close the data file, the resource file is written with all of this information, the channels that are on display, the time range that was used, colors, cursors, etc., and importantly, in this case, the virtual channel information as well. Now, just to reinforce another point with the resource files as well, for those people who didn't see the earlier sessions, and that is, if we had set up virtual channels, cursors, etc., on one file here, and we wish to apply it to many others, we could go to File, Resource Files, Save, and then apply the same resources to all other files that we open or a subset of them. Okay. Right, so what else can we do with the virtual channels? Let's go back to edit the channel expression here. So we'll take out channel 1, and we'll now look at waveform from channel. So we could simply copy a waveform or a level channel. So just as I did before, CH meaning channel, open bracket, and the channel number, ending bracket after that. Then we've got event channel using kernel. Well, this is rather interesting, especially when we're dealing with spiking data. So if we take channel 9 here, put it up to the top, and I'll just make this a lot smaller. So Control and Shift to compress the y-axis there. Waveform from channel, event channel using kernel. So channel 9 I wish to process. I'm fitting a Gaussian this time with a width of 1 second, and I say OK. Now you'll see we've got a waveform changing in amplitude. So as the events sum, Gaussians are fitted to each one of these, and they sum and form this rather irregular waveform here. So this could be used, in one case, for heart rate variability. It could be used directly on fast spike data and gives us some information about frequency. If I change the width of the Gaussian, like so, you'll see, I'm just going to change the setting as well there for the sample rate. You can see the Gaussians fitted at each one of these data points. Now, these are symmetrical. We can ask for asymmetric data and other shapes, as you saw. Right, let's look further. Waveform from channel. So event channel using kernel, event instantaneous frequency. So if we have drawn our data as instantaneous frequency, it's a nice display perhaps. It gives us some information, but it's not easily measurable. So the event instantaneous frequency will allow us to draw as a waveform the instantaneous frequency channel. So very quickly, let's show all of this data. Channel 9, we want to change the drawing mode. That's going to be instantaneous frequency, draw. Let's put dot size up a little so you can see it. Okay. And optimize. Okay, so a lot of data there. Edit channel expression, event channel, instantaneous frequency. Channel 9, linear or cubic spline interpolation. We'll stick with linear, and no gap. Okay. So now we optimize that, and then we superimpose one on the other. You should see that that is an exact replica, but now a waveform. And why a waveform? Well, what we may want to do is use cursors to measure features of this waveform, perhaps with an Alt and key 1 to put a cursor on the screen and find when we go above certain levels. That isn't easily accessible on the instantaneously drawn channel. So converting it to a waveform is very useful there. What else have we got? Real mark data item. We can take a real mark channel. A real mark channel is a set of data points that is time, and behind them they have a number of reals attached to them. Now, we'll look at this a little later with the active cursors, but essentially you can plot those values using the virtual channel here, and then again, as a waveform, use active cursors and other waveform analysis techniques on it. Now, more interesting for a lot of you may be the spectral functions. So let's try with the channel 3 here. Now I'm going to ignore my original channel 1, V1 virtual channel, and create a new virtual from it. Let's just open this out a bit so we can see more clearly what's going on. Now, if I create spectral functions, I can look at dominant frequency, mean frequency of the waveform, spectral edge, or power in bands, or ratio of bands. Now this is EMG, but let's consider it EEG for a second. Channel 3, and we're looking in the range, say 4 to, oh sorry, that should be 1 hertz as the resolution, and we may be looking for, to say 40 hertz to give me a chance with EMG, but then divide by a power, so 40 to say 100 hertz. Okay. So a ratio of power there. Once again, we have a waveform which we can use active cursors on to find times over which we go above a level, etc. Now, if we've got this waveform here and we don't want to use cursors, we could create yet another virtual channel. And in this case, I'm going to say where our channel 4002 is greater than 0.3, shall we say. Now, as a state of 0 and 1 here, we can now take a measure of this channel and know how much time was spent above this 0.3 units. Okay. Another thought here is once we've got an open-close state, we could also use this as a trigger to mark, for the cursor 0, I should say, when we get to active cursors, to mark where the beginning of a section of interest may be. Right, just a quick question here. We've been dealing with data that's almost always recorded by Spike2, and that could be data recorded through the 1401 and our talker system, where we can acquire data directly from their hardware, third-party hardware, DSI, Delsys, Intan, etc. Okay. Now, somebody's just asked, how about importing data? So file, import. There's a large list of third-party file formats we can import, but by far the most asked for one is text import, or ASCII. And I don't know what the demo.txt is. That's probably not going to help. Well, let's see how this copes anyway. I can show you this far. Here's the ASCII file import. Generally, I would reset the config, so no config, and then I would go through carefully setting out where you want to start the import from. So obviously here we've got a header which isn't real data in terms of waveforms or events, and then I would deselect the channels columns that I do and do not wish to import. If that all proves successful, I could save the config and then reload that every time that I wish to import further files. Okay, so that's hopefully answering your question, how to import ASCII data. But it really depends on the format of the ASCII as to whether a simple setup like that will do, or whether channels need different sampling rates. For example, let's go here. This channel is set to import at 10,000 hertz. Well, it may be something at only 1 hertz, so we can individually change the channel sample rates there. Right. Hopefully that'll give you something to look at. Okay, right, one more question here, back on subject, which is virtual channels. Could you use these virtual channels to determine a threshold to use as a trigger for a laser, for example? Right, it's something that comes up regularly. Using this as in a loop, the virtual channels, like the memory channels, are at the computer. So that means that we have transferred data from the 1401 or from one of these third-party devices through a talker, and it's arrived at the computer. Now let's argue that that's taken about 20 milliseconds to arrive. We've then got to initiate the call to the virtual channel to then take the data that's appeared in the file and draw it, calculate the new values as required by the virtual channel expression. We could then use an active cursor or a script to detect, does the virtual channel go above a level? Does a channel like the one at the top here, V3, now show an open close state, some flag to us to say something has happened and we need to react to it. At which point we could send a message back to the 1401 for stimulation. That may again take 20 milliseconds. So if we said it was just 40 milliseconds return time, would that be okay for you to trigger a laser? Okay. So I'm not sure whether I read out the question completely, but I'll do it again just in case. Could you use these virtual channels to determine a threshold to use as a trigger for a laser, for example? Okay. So hopefully I've answered your question, that you really need to consider the timing implications, and would it be better to do it at the 1401 anyway? The 1401 has access to data points as they come in. That does not mean that the channel is processed, however. Okay, so we do have people talking about looking at frequency content of an incoming signal and reacting to that. We're just looking at the data that's arriving at the 1401. Okay, so generally unprocessed. Right. All right, just a little off topic at the moment, but just to finish off then, if we were to look at the sampling configuration and at the sequencer and use graphical, I'm going to answer the question, which is, so how would you do this at the level of the 1401? So how would you react to a waveform channel going above a level, for example? Now I could write out a text sequencer here, but it's far easier for me to use the graphical sequence editor. So let's use just a digital and one analog output. So graphical editor, and I'll choose a section, it doesn't matter which. Now, the time in this section doesn't have to be this full 1 second. It doesn't have to be 100 seconds in length. We could have it really very small. Let's say it's 10 milliseconds or so. I'll then put in this item here. And that is set to fixed delay, random delay, Poisson delay, event burst, so detect when a number of spikes will occur within a period of time. Variables equal, not equal to each other, next event, the next spike that comes in, or next marker. And then we see the channels, channel above, below, outside, within. So let's wait for channel above. Which channel are you looking at, and what is the threshold? Okay, so let's say that's 1.2 volts if the scale is set, the channel scale is set to volts, and at 0.003 seconds into this output. Now, if we wait for the channel to be above, then we move on in time. Otherwise, we're pretty much stuck here. We might then produce an analog or digital output. Let's just tick that one over there. Size of 5. Yep. Okay, so there's a rising edge trigger, which is this scale very soon after this decision point. So once the channel has gone above a level, then we can trigger the output. Okay, so that's how I would approach it. Right. Okay. Right. We've been talking about virtual channels so far, and I'm being pushed a little to go on to the active cursors. So I guess it's we need really just to finish off the other functions before we do that, and then we can continue on the with the idea of reacting to an incoming waveform online, and at least placing a mark in the data file to say we found an event, and that could then be used to then trigger a sequencer via a script. Editing the expression again for virtual channel 3. We've looked at spectral functions. So we've looked at power, as you see in the middle channel, spectral edge, mean frequency and dominant frequency. So that's a spectral edge of channel 3 again, setting a frequency resolution and what are we after. And this may be median frequency. And okay, that's gone off screen. Optimize. Oops, I don't think we've got any there. Oh, sorry, because I combined two expressions. There we go. Right. So another waveform. What else could we do with this? Well, perhaps we now want to add a channel process to the virtual channel, which itself is calculated from another virtual or a waveform, or even an event type channel. So here we could do a DC remove. Okay. So all the channel processes that we could apply to regular disk-based channels can also be applied to those virtual channels. Let's clear this out while I remember, and now look at generating a waveform. Okay, so we saw briefly the combination of memory channels and the virtual channels earlier, where we had a ramp and the changing frequency sinusoid. Well, how would we get there manually? Well, we would use the generate waveform function here. We can specify a sinusoid, and let's set a frequency 10 Hertz. Okay, and so it's writing out the expression, or loosely command for us. Now, if I optimize this, you'll see that it sits between -1 and +1. Zooming in a little, it provides us a view of the sign itself. Now, if I multiply that by 5, that is now the full range of E41's output in normal operation. I could add to that another generated waveform, which could be an envelope, rising over half a second, holding for 2 seconds, and falling again for 3 seconds. Okay, so unrecognized input because we haven't made sense of the expression. Let's go to the beginning of the window here. And oops, there we go. Now we have the rise of half a second, hold for 2 seconds, and the fall for 3. So the envelope that I've produced, multiplied by the sign there, has given us a changing amplitude sign. So some people would call it a pip, some people call it a chirp type of output. Other shapes we could generate include the square and triangle waves. We could produce a ramp of time, etc. So you're combining these expressions together to produce what you want. Now, one thing that's seems to be missing here is the ability to generate some random values. Now, we tend to do that with a script very easily, a simple rand command, and either an array or a return of a single value, depending on what you're after. But you can always contact us for help on that. Okay, so shapes that we can produce, combining with an expression or even a channel already added to the expression area here. Taking our channel 3, we now have rectify absolute, min and max. So rectify the selection. So if I take my channel 3 out, absolute, channel 3, there's a rectification. Was that, sorry, absolute. Okay. Right, why has that done that for me? Let me just match channel 3. Okay. Right, I'm a little bit surprised at that. Anyway, other expressions, absolute, sorry, halfway rectified, maximum of selection, minimum of selection. Now we could go through all of these, but I don't really wish to bore you. Looking at other items here, the square of the selection, the square root of the selection, cosine, etc. Well, perhaps the square of the selection would be useful. Now, if we took channel 1, I think, show hide channels by right-clicking here, hide everything, show channel 1, draw. Okay, and again, this has got a channel process on it, so let's remove everything, and we're back to normal. Analysis, virtual channel, create new. We're going to square, so effectively we're just doing this. Okay. So in some cases, just squaring the data allows us to flatten out areas and make it easier to find other features. Now, used in combination with the original, of course, active cursors may not then trip over small, what might be called noisy events on the original, with a virtual channel squared and perhaps filtered a little. So we're using the virtual channel as an aid to the cursor search functions. So that's a moment to move on to the cursors. So cursor 0. All the cursors are generally inactive. You have 10 cursors. With 2 on the screen, we could get to the cursor regions, and we can read out values. We can change the measurement that we're after from the drop-down list here, and the values will update in this window. We can copy these. We can put them to the log view, etc., etc. But if we've got to move these cursors from peak to peak to peak, logging all this data, it's mind-numbing. So these cursors can become active. Now, cursor 0 is the main cursor. Only if it moves will all other cursors update. And of course, they need to be set into an active mode as well. What I'm going to do here is just some simple ECG RR interval work. I'm going to ask for a peak find of channel 1, where the amplitude is, say, 2 units. In fact, no, I'm going to set it lower than that and say, OK. Now, as I step, yes, there we go. You find that we find the R wave peak, but also this smaller peak here as well. And that's not what we want. So what would we do to get around that? Well, we could say in the active mode that there is a minimum step. So once we found the R wave, we would jump over a section of time and not start hunting again. Now, we don't know how this data is going to vary, so I'm rather worried about doing that. So therefore, I could change the minimum amplitude, perhaps to 2, and that means that this event here does not rise and fall by this value 2, so won't be included. There's also the maximum width for peak. So we could measure the peak duration here and set that plus a little bit in here. So only peaks of a certain width or under a certain width will be accepted. All others will measure local maximum. Have we risen in time and have we fallen in time? If not, then that smaller peak won't be included. So there we go. That's a better detection then. So imagine now we were running online. So I'll set this to rerun. I'll set this to only channel 1. I'll put this out of the way. And now, instead of an XY channel, we're going to data channel from measurements, which is also available from here, measurements, data channel. Up at the top third is what we expect cursor 0 to do. So find a peak on channel 1 with all the settings I've just set using the active cursor mode on the right click. Below that, in the X measurement, we are going to plot time versus the Y measurement, if we need one, of value at point. So what's the amplitude at peak, for example? Area, mean, etc. If we have multiple cursors or multiple time points that we could put in. But all we really want is an event. And that is going to be a single timestamp, so therefore it doesn't have a y-axis, doesn't have a value. We only have time. And that's on the X. So new and update the window as quickly as it can. And leeway for processing, there is no leeway for processing. Leeway for processing is where we need cursor 0 to jump to the new event, the new trigger, the new waveform feature. And then there must be time, leeway, for other cursors to move into their position as well. So you can imagine something like this RR interval. If I found one R wave peak and then I said, go and find the next one that's coming now, but it hasn't arrived yet, then my measurements are no good at all. So I need to give, say, a second as a leeway for processing for that new feature to come in. Now, obviously, you could do it in reverse and always look backwards in that example. Let's stop and rerun again. The no leeway, I'm not using any other cursors, apply and OK. Now you'll see cursor 0 is nicely placing markers at every one of the R wave peaks. Now, for the laser question, imagine now that you've looked at the power, a virtual channel, been calculated on the fly. Waveform goes above a level, it peaks, some other variable has been matched, and then this cursor or a script can leave a marker there on the data to say, this is where I found the match. It could, at the same time, send off a key. So we'd use the command sample key, and that could trigger one of those sections. So where we were using the graphical sequencer, we placed the icon, the wait for channel to be above, we would initiate that section of code with a keyboard character, okay, generally speaking. Right, so there's our marker channel coming in as an event. If I change the draw mode of that, we now have a mean frequency. Draw. Okay, so mean frequency of the R wave times. If I do it per minute, we now have a BPM, beats per minute. there is a question, how would you do for finding the P wave only? Right. Let's take two cursors to make to illustrate this a little better. Cursor 0 must move, remember. Cursor 1 we could set to find the previous peak. Now that's a bit over the top really, because if cursor 0 is already leaving a marker behind, we could just look for data points, the data point left behind by cursor 0. So this is just expensive in terms of processing, but it does illustrate a point. So give a large amount of time to guarantee that you've got the previous peak. So we're doing a backward search from the position of cursor 0. And the amplitude again is cursor 2. We'll say OK. So as these two cursors move along, we've got the two R-wave peaks. Now, if we wanted to find something inside here, we look for the next easiest item. So we could say that we want to find the maximum value of channel 1 between cursor 0 and cursor 1. Okay. Now, if I do that, we're actually going to pick out these edges. So I need to give this a little bit of time. So let's say 0.001. And see how that copes. So 0, yes, it's a bit too close. I should have done a measurement. So let's zoom in. So I need to get into a nice clean area here. So we're looking at 50 milliseconds or so. Cursor 2, active mode. 50, 50. Right. Trying to do this at speed. Maximum value, channel 1, cursor 0. I've got my signs around the wrong way. Cursor 0 minus to cursor 1 plus. Oh, you've got to be joking. Right, so that's an error too. So I need, right. Okay, maybe I'm not seeing it for rushing. So I started search. Okay, let's do this. It's cursor 1 plus 0.05 to cursor 0. Minus 0.05. So that wasn't logical before. There we go. So sorry about that. So there's cursor 2, finding the peak here. We could limit the search range up to a known time here to find the peak, and therefore we could find this peak or indeed troughs in a segment of the complex here as well. So I hope that gives you an idea. If we then go to a data channel and to plot the data, we simply say that we want the time of the P wave, T wave, whatever we've detected, and that's going to be this cursor 2, not cursor 0. New and process. There we go. So that's the item marker left behind. Right. Another quick question here. How do you compile the measurements between cursor regions into one spreadsheet as the cursors move? I'm not entirely sure quite what you're getting at there. Often it's Often it's better to use a script to automate functions just like this. For example, there was a guy, I won't mention his name, many years ago. He'd spent a long time moving cursors, cursors in non-active mode in 5-second chunks, taking measurements and logging it to a text file. Now, hours and hours and hours he spent, and I met him one day, and I put together a script which was probably only 5 or 6 lines, and it went through his sleep recording of 8 or so hours in a few seconds, and dumped the data out, and that was it. And he sat there banging his head on the table. So if he'd realized, if he'd accessed the scripting language, perhaps he could have saved himself a lot of time. If we take 2 cursors now to mimic that, in fact, I'll right-click cursor 2 active mode. I'm going to set this to static. And we've got cursor 1, which I'm going to ask for it to be an expression, and that's going to be cursor 0 minus 5. And cursor 0 is going to be an expression which is itself cursor 0 plus 5 seconds. There we go. We're marching through the data file. Now, no matter which key combination I press, that is Control Shift and the left or right arrow, the expression means that we're always marching into positive time. Right. Now, to be able to log the data, if we had cursor regions here, cursor moves, we have a new measurement here. Cursor moves, we have a new measurement produced. If we now look at an XY view using these cursors, and we say measure the time at which cursor 0 is, I'm using that as my reference, versus the area under curve. For example, area of channel 1, and that's going to be a measurement between cursor 1 and cursor 0, new and process. Now, I'm going to be a little bit different here. Tile that vertically. Let's say I've got a gap in the center here, or an area in the center I'm really not happy with. So I'm going to process from 0 to 70 seconds. Process. Okay. Have I set the wrong item there? I don't think so. Expression, cursor 0, area. Okay, so that should be fine. 0 to 70 seconds. Process. Okay, and the idea was then to say, right, I'll then go from 80 seconds to the end of the file and process. Okay, so why am I not seeing any data there? I have not chosen the wrong channel, so this is expression, measure, time at point area, channel 1, start time, and time, that should work fine. Okay, I'm not going to waste time there, but the point was I can process multiple areas from 0 to the 70 seconds and then jump 10 seconds and process to the end here. Okay, so sorry about that, but this is all live. We're trying things out, and so I'll need to have a think why that didn't work in a second. All right, where are we? We've got a few minutes before the end here, but we've still got a lot to talk about. So let's go back to our channels, our data. Okay, not right, and view standard display. Right, so analysis. The memory buffers. I'm sure you've got an appreciation there of creating the memory buffer, placing data in it, whether it's imported peaks, troughs, level crossings, etc. Through the import function. Adding, as we saw, items using a cursor when we were dealing with the text marks. Deleting items, well, adding in reverse. Importing channel, as you would appreciate, taking an existing channel, importing it in, and finally writing to channels. So if I have a memory channel and I wish to save it, then I'm given a list of available channels within the file. Now remember, you may have recorded your data with a maximum of 32 channels available. So it may be necessary to export your data, setting a new header size, allowing for more channels, so you can save these extra memories. Okay, so the virtual channels. Creating a virtual channel, setting a sample rate for it, whether it's going to match an existing channel or whether you want to upsample or downsample to a new value. And then editing the channel expressions. Remember, we can look at creating our own waveforms, writing an expression, adding two channels together, subtracting two channels, or even creating those spectral functions. Okay, what I wanted to get on to next was the marker filter. Okay, now this is vitally important when it comes to the spikes here. And it's also used with marker codes, the text marks, digital markers that are recorded. If I draw these channels, this channel, in its original form, we have wave mark. You'll see each one of these has now a code next to it. The reason we moved away from wave mark to waveform is because if we draw them like so, time compressed there, you can't see what the codes anyway. So we've now decided to hide them. Right. So I want to extract all the 0, 1 markers. What I can do is right click and I'll use a marker filter and switch off the 0, 1. Careful to invert the selection and update. So now I only have the 0, 1 markers in place. Now, I have 4 levels of marker code. So if I had spikes, as an example, which were a combination of 2 spikes firing, I might want to code them as 0, 1 on this first grid and 0, n on the second. And I would need to make sure that the second grid had the correct value, the correct code as well for that single spike, those spikes to appear. Okay. Right. So marker filter, a means of showing and hiding different codes. If we go back a level, we look at the text marks, you'll see the codes here, 0, 1, 0, 3, 0, 2. Again, the marker filter will show and hide those markers according to your request. Okay, now a couple of other things I wanted to get through, and that is mention more of the XY views. Okay, so we have looked at, I'm annoyed at that, the XY plot not working. Let's just try that again. Maybe it was the wrong window. So, right, cursor 0, cursor 1. Cursor 0 is marching through the data at 5-second intervals. So we can set it to expression, cursor 0 plus 5, and cursor 1 trailing behind expression, cursor 0 minus 5. Okay. Cursor 0 marches, cursor 1 follows. If then we produce an XY view, this is all correct. We're measuring at the time, cursor 0. We're plotting area, which is what I asked for before, between cursor 1 and cursor 0. New and process. I've done something daft, I'm sure. Right. Okay, I'll come back to that. My aim was to go through the XY plots and show you a few more measurement functions, but ultimately to get to here, where if I call this up a script, okay, run this and ask for a data file. Okay. Right, so I have a data file with movement data. That is points measured on this animal's body here. Now I'm using the XY plots, not with active cursors, but as an area in which I can display the measured data. So I have to the right, upper right here, the XY plane, ZX plane below it, and the YZ plane. Now, if you'll notice in this top left view, I can drag the view around and I can see this little guy on a treadmill moving forward and backward, and I can rotate the view accordingly. So these are still measurement channels, but ones that the script has provided data for, not necessarily directly through the active cursors and into the XY view. So just to give you an idea there. Okay, so let's stop that. And one little taster, if I can get this going. Right. I'm closing all these windows. I don't see why I should, because I've got this function here, window, windows. If I go to here, then I can close all windows. Those windows. And then all I have to do is, no, okay, no, there we go. So very quickly, close them all down. Now, if I run this, gives you a flavor of what else a script could do in using XY views and data views to hold data. Okay, so let's choose the demo file, and I think 120 seconds will be fine. Okay, so it takes a few moments to process this, but wavelet analysis. We're looking at frequency information in this view. Again, using an XY view as the viewer, but this is an image that's been produced by the script and has been posted into this window. And you can see, I think, that we've got a logarithmic y-axis display there as well. Okay, so just a taster of what a script could do. Right, now I think we've come to the end of our hour now. Are there any questions that I could answer, apart from why the XY plot didn't work? And I'm sure that'll be quite evident when we go off air. Right, here we go. So could you show once more how you can join two parts of data with a gap in between as you did in the beginning? Right, so let's take our channels data. Let's take the EMG, which we can see quite clearly has gaps in it. And we'll do this a couple of ways. First is channel process. A fill gaps, add. There is now a line at a value 0, that could be a value 8, drawn between those two data points, last in this section, the beginning in this. That's one way. Now, that's not real data, of course, so let's clear that. Let's throw a cursor at either end. Okay. Now, this is dealing with one gap. But if your data is very much like this, where you've got lots of gaps, we may want to write a script to go and find them, automatically work out the difference, the gap size, and then compress it using the method that we're doing now. So, analysis, memory buffer, create new. Remember, we have to choose which type of memory buffer. We're going to use waveform for this. And we're going to import channel 3 up to, but not beyond, channel cursor 1. There we go. That's imported. Nice clean break here. If I then take this value, time difference, and I channel process the original channel 3, add, time shift, and add. It's got to be a negative time. I'm shifting to the left. There we go. So we've moved this data to the left by 1.1 seconds approximately. And now we're going to import into our memory channel the new source data from cursor 1 to the end of the file. Okay, there we have it. So now we've got a continuous section of waveform. Once again, analysis, memory buffer, write to channel, or right-click M1, write all memory buffer. Right. Okay, a couple more questions. Love the spectral log y-axis. Is that only available in version 10? I have version 8. I thought wavelets might just have, or that particular function, might just have snuck into version 8, but I can check and get back to you on that. And another one on the same sort of thing. Can one do a wavelet analysis to an ongoing recording over the last 10 minutes or so? Never tried. In theory, it's perfectly possible, but everything's got to be broken up into to chunks. An FFT, though, is perfectly possible to do. So let's quickly look at that. Show standard display. Okay, let's look at LFP this time. So this goes on for a while. Okay, so 160 odd seconds. That should give me plenty of time. Right, let's rerun this guy. View, rerun. Window tile, let's go analysis. We're going to go for a power spectrum. 512 point FFT, just something to get us going. Update the window as quickly as possible and display the last second of data. Apply. Window tile vertically. Right. What is going on here? Okay, I'm expecting the power window to be updating. 1024, just checking the sample rate here. Okay, so that should be fine. It's channel 10, of course. Change. Right, there we go, power spectrum. The next thing to do is virtual channel, create new channel. With that, and we're going to say that we want the spectral function power in band or ratio of bands. Let's say no worse than 1 Hertz resolution, and we want to display from 0 to 50 Hertz. So we can see something on the screen. So that's power. This is power. If we take a duplicate of this channel, the original channel, channel draw mode, sonogram, raw, there we go. So 3 views of power here. So the sonogram, the virtual channel where we're looking at a particular band, 0 to 50 hertz, I think I said, and here the power spectrum as a result view. And if I set that to logarithmic, there we go. All right. So 3 different views. I would like, good. Right. I would like to use this log y-axis for version 7. Okay, I'll get back to you too, Marta. You didn't select the LFP channel for the virtual channel. You're quite right. Yes, my mistake. Right, I think that's it. If anybody else has got any last questions, then I think we'll call it a day today, and hopefully we'll see you for some analysis next week, where we'll be looking more at the result views. So these are the older interval histograms, PSTHs, averages, etc. Okay, amongst other things. I'm afraid Spike2 is a huge program. There's an awful lot to talk about, and many of these functions, in fact, the majority work together. And so it's rather difficult to give you sometimes a very clear real-world usage without combining a lot of things. Okay, right. Well, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.